The Byzantine calendar, also called Creation Era of Constantinople, or Era of the World, was the calendar used by the Eastern Orthodox Church from c. 691 to 1728 in the Ecumenical Patriarchate. It was also the official calendar of the Byzantine Empire from 988 to 1453, and of Kiev in Russia from c. 988 to 1700. The calendar is based on the Julian calendar, except that the year started on the 1st of September and the year number used an Anno Mundi epoch derived from the Septuagint version of the Bible. It placed the date of creation at 5,509 years before the Incarnation, and was characterized by a certain tendency which had already been a tradition among Jews and early Christians to number the years from the foundation of the world. Its year 1, the supposed date of creation, was September 1, 5509 BC to August 31, 5508 BC. History. It is not known who invented the world era and when. However, the first appearance of the term is in the treatise of a certain monk and priest, Georgios, who mentions all the main variants of the world era in his work. Georgios argues that the main advantage of the world era is the common starting point of the astronomical lunar and solar cycles, and of the cycle of indictions, the usual dating system in Byzantium since the 6th century. He also already regards it as the most convenient for the Easter computus. Complex calculations of the 19-year lunar and 28-year solar cycles within this world era allowed scholars to discover the cosmic significance of certain historical dates, such as the birth of Christ or the crucifixion. This date underwent minor revisions before being finalized in the mid-7th century, although its precursors were developed c. AD 412. By the second half of the 7th century, the creation era was known in Western Europe, at least in Great Britain. By the late 10th century, around AD 988, when the era appears in use on official government records, a unified system was widely recognized across the Eastern Roman world. The era was ultimately calculated as starting on September 1, and Jesus was thought to have been born in the year 5509 Annus Mundi, the year since the creation of the world. Thus historical time was calculated from the creation, and not from Christ's birth, as in the West. The Eastern Church avoided the use of the Anno Domini system of Dionysius Exiguus, since the date of Christ's birth was debated in Constantinople as late as the 14th century. Otherwise, the creation era was identical to the Julian calendar, except that the names of the months were transcribed from Latin into Greek. The first day of the year was September 1, so that both the ecclesiastical and civil calendar years ran from the 1st of September to the 31st of August, which to the present day is the church year, and the date of creation, its year 1, was September 1, 5509 BC to August 31, 5508 BC. The leap day of the Byzantine calendar was obtained in an identical manner to the bissextile day of the original Roman version of the Julian calendar, by doubling the 6th day before the calends of March, i.e., by doubling the 24th of February. The Byzantine world era was gradually replaced in the Orthodox Church by the Christian era, which was utilized initially by Patriarch Theophanes I Carix in 1597, afterwards by Patriarch Cyril Lacaris in 1626, and then formally established by the Church in 1728. Meanwhile, as Russia received Orthodox Christianity from Byzantium, she inherited the Orthodox calendar based on the Byzantine era. After the collapse of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, the era continued to be used by Russia, which witnessed millennialist movements in Moscow in AD 1492 due to the end of the church calendar. It was only in AD 1700 that the Byzantine world era in Russia was changed to the Julian calendar by Peter the Great. It still forms the basis of traditional Orthodox calendars up to today. September AD 2000 began the year 7509 AM. Earliest Christian sources on the age of the world. The earliest extant Christian writings on the age of the world according to the biblical chronology are by Theophilus, the sixth bishop of Antioch from the Apostles, in his apologetic work to Autolycus, and by Julius Africanus in his 5 books of chronology. Both of these early Christian writers, following the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, determined the age of the world to have been about 5,530 years at the birth of Christ. Dr. Ben Zion Wacholder points out that the writings of the Church Fathers on this subject are of vital significance, in that through the Christian chronographers a window to the earlier Hellenistic biblical chronographers is preserved. An immense intellectual effort was expended during the Hellenistic period by both Jews and pagans to date creation, the flood, Exodus, building of the temple. In the course of their studies, men such as Tatian of Antioch, Clement of Alexandria, Hippolytus of Rome, Julius Africanus of Jerusalem, Eusebius of Caesarea in Palestine, and Pseudo-Justin frequently quoted their predecessors, the Greco-Jewish biblical chronographers of the Hellenistic period, thereby allowing discernment of more distant scholarship. The Hellenistic Jewish writer Demetrius the chronographer wrote on the kings of Judea, which dealt with biblical exegesis, mainly chronology. He computed the date of the flood and the birth of Abraham exactly as in the Septuagint, and first established the Annus Adami, era of Adam, the antecedent of the Hebrew world era, and of the Alexandrian and Byzantine creation eras. Alexandrian era. The Alexandrian era, developed in AD 412, was the precursor to the Byzantine era. After the initial attempts by Hippolytus, Clement of Alexandria, and others, the Alexandrian computation of the date of creation was worked out to be the 25th of March 5493 BC. The Alexandrine monk Panadorus reckoned 5,904 years from Adam to the year AD 412. His years began with August 29, corresponding to the 1st of Thoth, the Egyptian New Year. Annianus of Alexandria, however, preferred the Annunciation style as New Year's Day, the 25th of March, and shifted the Panadorus era by about 6 months, to begin on the 25th of March. This created the Alexandrian era, whose first day was the first day of the proleptic Alexandrian civil year in progress, the 29th of August 5493 BC, with the ecclesiastical year beginning on the 25th of March 5493 BC. This system presents in a masterly sort of way the mystical coincidence of the 3 main dates of the world's history: the beginning of creation, the incarnation, and the resurrection of Christ. All these events happened, according to the Alexandrian chronology, on the 25th of March. Furthermore, the first 2 events were separated by the period of exactly 5,500 years. The first and the third one occurred on Sunday, the sacred day of the beginning of the creation and its renovation through Christ. Dionysius of Alexandria had earlier emphatically quoted mystical justifications for the choice of March 25th as the start of the year. March 25th was considered to be the anniversary of creation itself. It was the first day of the year in the medieval Julian calendar and the nominal vernal equinox. Considering that Christ was conceived at that date turned March 25th into the Feast of the Annunciation, which had to be followed, 9 months later, by the celebration of the birth of Christ, Christmas, on December 25th. The Alexandrian era of March 25, 5493 BC was adopted by Church Fathers such as Maximus the Confessor and Theophanes the Confessor, as well as chroniclers such as George Syncellus. Its striking mysticism made it popular in Byzantium, especially in monastic circles. However, this masterpiece of Christian symbolism had 2 serious weak points: historical inaccuracy surrounding the date of resurrection as determined by its Easter computus, and its contradiction to the chronology of the Gospel of St. John regarding the date of the crucifixion on Friday after the Passover. Chronicon pascala, a new variant of the world era, was suggested in the Chronicon pascala, a valuable Byzantine universal chronicle of the world, composed about the year 630 AD by some representative of the Antiochian scholarly tradition. It had for its basis a chronological list of events extending from the creation of Adam to the year AD 627. The chronology of the writer is based on the figures of the Bible and begins with the 21st of March 5507. For its influence on Greek Christian chronology, and also because of its wide scope, the Chronicon pascala takes its place beside Eusebius and the Chronicle of the monk Georgius Syncellus, which was so important in the Middle Ages, but in respect of form it is inferior to these works. By the late 10th century, the Byzantine era, which had become fixed at September 1, 5509 BC since at least the mid-7th century, had become the widely accepted calendar of choice par excellence for Chalcedonian orthodoxy. Accounts in Church Fathers. St. John Chrysostom says in his homily on the cross and the thief, that Christ opened for us today paradise, which had remained closed for some 5,000 years. St. Isaac the Syrian writes in a homily that before Christ, for 5,000 years, 500 and some years, God left Adam to labor on the earth. St. Augustine of Hippo writes in the City of God, let us omit the conjectures of men who know not what they say. When they speak of the nature and origin of the human race, they are deceived by those highly mendacious documents which profess to give the history of many thousands of years. Though reckoning by the sacred writings we find that not 6,000 years have passed. Augustine goes on to say that the ancient Greek chronology does not exceed the true account of the duration of the world as it is given in our documents, which are truly sacred. St. Hippolytus of Rome maintained on scriptural grounds that Jesus' birth took place in 5500 AM, and held that the birth of Christ took place on a Passover day, deducing that its month date was the 25th of March. He gave the following intervals. From Adam to the flood 2242 years, thence to Abraham 1141 years, thence to the Exodus chapter 430 years, thence to the Passover of Joshua chapter 41 years, thence to the Passover of Hezekiah 864 years, thence to the Passover of Josiah 114 years, thence to the Passover of Ezra chapter 107 years, and thence to the birth of Christ 563 years. In his commentary on Daniel, one of his earlier writings, he proceeds to set out additional reasons for accepting the date of 5500 AM. First he quotes Exod. XXV. 10f, and pointing out that the length, breadth and height of the Ark of the Covenant amount in all to 5.5 cubits, says that these symbolize the 5,500 years from Adam, at the end of which the Savior was born. He then quotes from J.N. XIX. 14, it was about the 6th hour, and, understanding by that 5.5 hours, takes each hour to correspond to 1,000 years of the world's life. Around AD 202, Hippolytus held that Jesus was born in the 42nd year of the reign of Augustus, and that he was born in 5500 AM. In his commentary on Daniel he did not need to establish the precise year of Jesus' birth. He is not concerned about the day of the week, the month date, or even the year. It was sufficient for his purpose to show that Christ was born in the days of Augustus in 5500 AM. Accounts in Byzantine authors. From Justinian's decree in AD 537 that all dates must include the indiction. The unification of the theological date of creation with the administrative system of indiction cycles became commonly referred to amongst Byzantine authors. to whom the indiction was the standard measurement of time. In official documents in the year AD 691, we find the creation era in the Acts of the Quini-Sexte Council. As of the 15th day of the month of January last past, in the last fourth indiction. In the year 6190, we find the era also in the dating of the so-called Letter of Three Patriarchs to the Emperor Theophilos. By the 10th century the Byzantine era is found in the novellas of AD 947, 962, 964, and most surely of the year AD 988, all dated in this way, as well as the act of Patriarch Nicolaus to Chrysoburgos in AD 987. John Skylitzer's major work is the Synopsis of Histories, which covers the reigns of the Byzantine emperors from the death of Nicephorus I in 811 to the deposition of Michael IV in 1057. It continues the Chronicle of Theophanes the Confessor, quoting from him as an example of the common Byzantine dating method. He refers to Emperor Basil, writing that in the year 6508-1000, in the 13th indiction, the emperor sent a great force against the Bulgarian fortified positions on the far side of the Balkan Mountains. Nitas Choniates, sometimes called Ecominatus, was a Byzantine Greek historian. His chief work is his history, in 21 books, of the period from 1118 to 1207. Again, an example of the dating method can be seen as he refers to the fall of Constantinople to the Fourth Crusade as follows. The Queen of Cities fell to the Latins on the 12th day of the month of April of the 7th indiction in the year 6712-1204. The historian Ducas, writing c. AD 1460, makes a detailed account for the creation era. Although unrefined in style, the history of Ducas is both judicious and trustworthy, and it is the most valuable source for the closing years of the Byzantine Empire. From Adam, the first man created by God, to Noah, at whose time the flood took place, there were 10 generations. The first, which was from God, was that of Adam. The second, after 230 years, was that of Seth begotten of Adam. The third, 205 years after Seth, was that of Enos begotten of Seth. The fourth, 190 years after Enos, was that of Cainan begotten of Enos. The fifth, 170 years after Cainan, was that of Mahalalel begotten of Cainan. The sixth, 165 years after Mahalalel, was that of Jared begotten of Mahalalel. The seventh, 162 years after Jared, was that of Enoch begotten of Jared. The eighth, 165 years after Enoch, was that of Methuselah begotten of Enoch. The ninth, 167 years after Methuselah, was that of Lamech begotten of Methuselah. The 10th, 188 years after Lamech, was that of Noah. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Thus 2,242 years may be counted from Adam to the flood. There are also 10 generations from the flood to Abraham, numbering 1121 years. Abraham was 75 years old when he moved to the land of Canaan from Mesopotamia, and having resided there 25 years he begat Isaac. Isaac begat 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. When Jacob was 130 years old he went to Egypt with his 12 sons and grandchildren, 75 in number, and Abraham with his offspring dwelt in the land of Canaan 433 years. And having multiplied they numbered 12 tribes. A multitude of 600,000 were reckoned from the 12 sons of Jacob, whose names are as follows: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Dan, Joseph, and Benjamin. The descendants of Levi were Moses and Aaron. The latter was the first of the priesthood, while Moses was appointed to govern. In the 80th year of his life he walked through the Red Sea and led his people out of Egypt. This Moses flourished in the time of Inachos, son of Oceanus and king of Argos, who was the first Greek king to reign. Thus the Jews are more ancient than the Greeks. Remaining in the wilderness 40 years, they were governed for 25 years by Joshua, son of Nun, and by the judges for 454 years to the reign of Saul, the first king installed by them. During the first year of his reign the great David was born. Thus from Abraham to David 14 generations are numbered for a total of 1024 years. From David to the deportation to Babylon 586 BC, there are 14 generations totaling 609 years. From the Babylonian captivity to Christ there are 14 generations totaling 504 years. By the sequence of numbers we calculate the number of 5,500 years from the time of the first Adam to Christ.